Hello and welcome to the session, Business Pivots, Strengthening Your Region's Resilience. I'm Kennedy Webb, Communications Manager for the Ohio Mideastern Governments Association in Cambridge, Ohio. Omega is a council of governments serving 10 counties in eastern Ohio, including Belmont, Carroll, Columbiana, Coshocton, Guernsey, Holmes, Harrison, Jefferson, Muskingum, and Tuscarawas, in addition to 12 member cities from across the region. Our mission statement here at Omega is connecting communities to resources. I would like to thank everyone for attending this session, as well as thank NADO for giving me the opportunity to serve as moderator today. The impacts of COVID-19, like many other disruptions and downturns, are causing businesses to look for ways to stay open when their normal operations and customer demand are not possible. Demand is unpredictable, as are supply chains, but some businesses are finding ways to survive and even thrive. They're keeping jobs and business ownership in the communities we serve. RDOs can assist these businesses by connecting them to information and financial resources, peers and mentors, and offering coaching. I'm pleased to be joined today by our speakers, Barbara Wyckoff and Milka Lopez Mercado, with Creative Disruptors, who will talk about some of the themes of successful business pivots in an interactive presentation. A co-founder of the firm Creative Disruptors, Barbara brings an anthropologist lens to the world of business by listening, asking questions, and offering a bigger picture, systems-minded approach. Barbara works with social, civic, and business entrepreneurs and teams to evaluate their purpose and core competencies, reimagine their potential impact, and build the systems, relationships, and management to execute. Barbara is located in Maryland today. Milka serves as Financial Services Project Coordinator for Creative Disruptors, where she focuses on clients' financials and internal operations to identify and provide access to the resources needed to meet their goals. Milka believes that with the right tools, resources, and cooperation, enterprises can uplift and support their communities. She studied economics and political science at Temple University in Philadelphia, where she is currently located. Please feel free to ask questions throughout today's session, and we'll also be asking for questions at the end. Be sure to join us on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag NADOATC, sharing some of your highlights from this session. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Barbara and Milka.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Kenny, for that introduction. That's wonderful. And we do at Creative Disruptors value so much, particularly rural communities. And we say we provide business coaching to rural Main Street businesses. So if you can find that business on Main Street, that's who we're focused on helping. So thank you so much for that. And Milka is in charge of the slides, and I will do a lot of the talking, but Milka will jump in at the right moment. So what's our agenda for today? We are, let's see, there we go. We're focusing on resiliency and our pivot environment. We'll go over that just briefly. I think there's no one who's better informed than you about that. We also want to focus on our keys to pivoting, how you can support pivots, and what are some of the key pieces. Then we've got 6 ways and places you can help your businesses pivot. And then we've got some lessons learned from Appalachia, particularly Central Appalachia. That's where we've worked most intensely, is Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And then we really want to hear your questions and respond to that. As Kennedy said, we're striving for a more interactive session. Great, so let's figure out who's in the room with us. So we've got a quick document. I know there's 86 of you. Wow. So we're just gonna like go for broke here, and maybe not everybody will be able to respond, but we would love to have you go to the document that's listed in the chat box. Carrie's just uploaded that, and just quickly say name, region, and check all that apply. And really the point of all of this, there we go. The point of all of this is that it's about, it takes a village. It takes all of you folks to make this happen. So great. Amy, Carol, William, Jack, excellent, wonderful, very excited. You know, where are we? We need planners, we need entrepreneurs, we need municipal officials, academics, loan fund managers, we need all these folks. So thank you for filling this out. Oh yeah, some Oregon, nice. Arkansas, Middle Georgia, okay, cool. Northeast Georgia, great, wonderful. Oh, Melissa's on the call, great. Okay, so fun to see everybody here on the call. Florida, PA, yep. Thank you so much for filling this out. It's just great to see you all. Federal government, okay, right? That's a great other category. We didn't include federal government, so that's excellent to see that. But I'm going to say a lot of planners and support organizations, a little bit less on the business side, which is fine. We've organized this whole session to be more focused around how you can support your businesses versus how we would be talking to businesses. But yeah, community economic development planners, development organization staff, a couple of entrepreneurs and businesses, a couple of municipalities, and some loan fund management. I'm going to say interesting, no academics, which is fine. I don't miss them. I'm just saying that's an interesting thing that they're not there. So thank you for that. And yeah, this is great. It helps us see who's at the table and how to make sure we're responding to your issues and conversation. Okay, so economic resiliency. What is that? So Milka's going to advance the slide. So you know, we want to talk a little bit about our pivot environment. So there's no return. And I recently had a loss in my family, and somebody told me, your body has just blown apart into 1 million molecules, and now you're going to bring them all back together, but they're going to come back together in a different way. And I love that image because I think that's actually what we're facing as a society. We just had all our molecules blow apart as a society and our economy and everything. And now we're bringing them back. It's not that anything was wrong or bad or anything about before, but they're going to come back in a different setup. And so I know I don't need to remind you at all, but you know, we've got restaurants closing or operating at a minimum occupancy, gathering and events. We've got reduced local and state revenue as a result. We've got lower levels of consumer confidence, including you know, more inequality between folks who have and who don't. We've certainly seen an effect on our supply chains. We're really seeing people trying to bring their supply chain home. And we've seen actually really interesting population shift from urban areas to rural communities. I have friends in Vermont and West Virginia, and they say that the prices on properties has just skyrocketed and there's nothing available. I think one thing that's kind of interesting, I just want to give a quick example, right? Because you guys all know this, but I do a lot of work in tourism, and it's been really interesting to see a decrease, of course, in the from away tourism, right? Like I think about northern New Hampshire, they don't have all the people coming from Europe or wherever, but a really huge increase in the stay close to home tourism, right? And because people want to get outside and they want to walk the trails, and it's on one hand you would be like, oh well, tourism, it's doing great in New Hampshire, right? Like all these people are on the trail. I mean, the trails are packed. I mean, the people I know are like, it's terrifying to them how packed the trails are. But of course, what that means is that people are bringing their own sandwiches with them for lunch, and they're not spending the night. And, you know, so we see like an increased pressure on natural resources with a reduced opportunity for businesses that provide services. So it's important to go deep in understanding our pivot environment. Thanks. So like resiliency, what is our definition of resilience? So this is the dictionary. If you look this up online, it tells you the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and from toughness. And clearly that's where we are right now for sure. But I love to take on an added dimension to resiliency, which is spiraling forward. And I don't know the age. We've got 94 people on the call. I don't know your ages, but I used to play with a slinky, right? And what I loved about a slinky, if you remember a slinky, was that it had its own momentum and it actually spiraled forward. It didn't go back to where it was, it advanced, but yet it was a circular recovery process as it went down the stairs. And for me, that's really what I mean by resilience. It's not about going back to where we were before. It is about recovery from difficulties and toughness in a way that advances us down the stairs. And I think that's really important for us to think about when we think about resilience and when we think about businesses and pivots. Our experience just really quickly is the businesses we've been working with around their pivots are actually developing new business models, new ways to being, and they don't see that they're going back. They see a really important way forward to their productivity and profitability. So I think that's just an important nugget to hold on to. And we can go on to the next slide, but I do want to just remind everybody, questions, whatever, put it in the chat box. Thank goodness Kennedy's watching that. So here's something to put in the chat box. Why is small business retention an essential element of resiliency or resilience for your community? So any thoughts? Kennedy will pull those up and share those with us. She's the chat box master for this session, which is great. So why is small business retention important? You know, what's some of the advantages for your community that will contribute to resilience? So either you're not responding or Kennedy's not sharing.
We do not have anything so far, Barbara.
Okay, it's all right. It's all right.
This is Carrie, and there are a few that are just coming in.
Great.
Kennedy, if you see those, you can start to share them.
Sure.
Yeah. For me, this is such an important question because it outlines why we even care about our small businesses as we move forward.
I'm sorry, we have a few here. We have job creation, community identity.
Yeah.
And we have most of our businesses in rural North Carolina are small businesses.
Great point.
Right. Community character.
Mm-hmm. So great. A real focus on community, which we'll be talking about later for sure. But yeah, these are values that more and more, well, I think Americans have held these values for a long time, but they're being more and more recognized as important. Community character, community cohesion. We've seen, the data shows local businesses retain jobs. They might have to reduce salaries or hours to make it work, but they won't let people go. And when I read the headlines these days, I'm scared about where we're headed as far as employment. So all good points. Well, great. Anything else just to call out before we move ahead, Kennedy?
Yes. So Ryan Osborne says, I believe that the small businesses are the community in a way. Not only are the business owners, but those who frequent small businesses make up the community. When they remain resilient, so does the community. And Amber Metz says, there is a different level of awareness, comfort, and trust with existing businesses.
So great. And I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm just going to say, like, I talk a lot about community-based businesses. And what's so amazing about them is that they provide services to the community, and in return, the community buys their products. So it's a real mutual arrangement. So I love that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the red, green, and the red zone and the green zone. So now, as you know, this is like whatever language, maybe it resonates, maybe it doesn't, but we've been, especially in the spring, we were in the red zone. Oh my gosh. reactive. People have no food. How do we respond to emergency needs? Even now, we're about to have so many thousands of people not be able to pay rent and facing eviction. How do we respond to that? What does it look like? It looks like assisting neighbors, stabilizing businesses. We used to do a whole session on stabilizing your cash flow, like very much a red zone. How do we hunker down and just respond to this emergency? But at the same time, there's the green zone, and the green zone is the proactive mindset. Where am I going to go? How am I going to pivot? What am I going to do next? Right? So how do we know the answers to those questions? We actually connect to our passions and goals. And then this is what actually allows us to continue after the emergency, after the red zone. And I hate to say it, but usually it's some kind of balance between the two. And I've worked with so many organizations in the past 6 months, organizations and businesses that have been in the red zone, and then we've coached them into the green zone because actually both are needed. So I think we have a quick poll here. Where is your community? And really, where's your businesses in your community? So are they in the red zone, the green zone, both or neither? Where's your community, really your business community? And somebody else is.
Some votes are beginning to come in. We've got about 40% of our attendees voting, so we'll leave that open a little bit longer.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, we're at about 50% of attendees voting. And if you have more of an open-ended response, you're welcome to type into the questions box with your response as well.
Great.
All right, about 2/3 of people have voted, so let's give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, I will close the poll now and put up the results.
Both. Very interesting. I see 70% are both. Very interesting. Yeah, because that's reality, right? And but I'm glad to know that it is both, and it's not just red zone, because we've got to help businesses move forward and pivot and transform where they're going, and not just be in the red zone. So that's great. Cool. Thank you, everybody, for participating. So we're back to our slides. Of course, no wrong answers there. That's great. We got one more fun thing to do, and then we're gonna get into the meat. But this is just setting up what is a pivot. And I took guidance from basketball. So I don't know who out of all of you are interested in basketball, but a pivot is its term was started in the basketball field, which is about keeping one foot on the ground. So we've got about a 60-second video here about pivots in basketball. So I think we're going to quickly switch to playing the video, and then we'll come back to the PowerPoint.
Pivoting. Our pivot foot is our anchor foot, and it's so important that it stays grounded, no matter what type of catch that we do. We're going to show you different types of scenarios on footwork and catching the basketball. We're going to focus on the offensive player keeping the pivot foot anchored and balanced as they go through the triple threat motion. So important that that pivot foot stays down. This is all legal movement.
That's it. It's about keeping that pivot foot down on the ground. So what does that mean for a business? It means staying connected to your goals, what you're trying to achieve with your business. It means staying connected to your customers, even if their needs change in time, even if you add new customers, right? It means understanding your product and how a foot rooted in your product, but understanding that delivery mechanisms are going to have to change, or the supply chain might have to change. So that's really the point of that quick video, is about keeping one foot on the ground. And what does that look like? And interesting, you know, a lot of times it looks like partnerships. How do we keep connected to the partners we have to be able to work with them to come up with pivots? Okay, so I think Milka's got the slideshow back. There we go. So what are our solutions? So we've got 4 keys. The first one is understanding and building on what you have. So I've listed here helping businesses use the 8 capitals as a framework to identify resources. And when I'm going to be really honest, when I was talking about this with Carrie, she said, right, so it's not about the inventory you have, it's about these different capitals you have. So I have a quick story to tell you. It's a business, it's in Seattle actually. Their business originally, back in January anyway, their business was providing really cool things for workshops. So they would provide a photo booth or an interactive session, or, you know, everybody would log on and sign up for something and they would report back on the results, right? So they were all about meetings, but they had an amazing staff that understands logistics and getting equipment and things to places and how to work with customers, right? So that's who they were. So here it came. No more workshops, no more conferences. They did big conferences. They didn't do workshops, but no more conferences. What were they going to do? They could go on Zoom like everybody else, but that's not what they did. They weren't facilitators. They managed all these like cool add-ons that happen at conferences. I'm sure you've all experienced them. So what they decided was their resource they had to build on was individual capital. They had people really good at logistics. They had people really good at packing things up and shipping them, right? Like, it sounds crazy, but they had the ability to think out of the box and to lead. They had social capital. They had huge community trust in Seattle and partnerships, and their partnerships with local businesses in Seattle. And then they had some capital, financial capital, and that's pretty much what they had. So what they did was they started a company called Smile Your City. It's actually started as Smile Seattle, but there's Smile Portland, Smile all over the country now. And what they do is they work with the partners in an area to access commodities, you know, jams, jellies, whatever, and then they bring them into their warehouse, they pack them up, and they send them out to meet orders for people like Google and others who are saying, yeah, we want to give a little uplift to our employees who are sitting at home in quarantine or going into quarantine now that it's fall and everyone's cold and inside. And so they started this company, they started this whole line called Smile Seattle or Smile Your City. And what I love about that story is that it wasn't about how do we use our photography machine or our, you know, how do we go on Zoom, or, I mean, those are totally options, but I love that they thought really deeply about what did they have, and they used this kind of framework to think about what did they have, and they had built capital, they had warehouses, they had the ability to bring in resources, they had partnerships or social capital, they had skills, individual capital, and they certainly had intellectual capital to think out of the box and to lead. So I just share that story as like trying to understand, what does it mean? So another thing is to understand and respond to customers' current needs, not what we thought they needed, not what we thought they needed pre-pandemic, but what do they need now? And you know, there's different ways to do it, but I want to share one quick story. My favorite story is a food truck, right, who was providing food to actually North Carolina. I know there's many of you from North Carolina on the phone. And he had a food truck. He'd go down to the office buildings and would, provide food, a thriving business. Suddenly there's no one in the offices, right? So he's like, uh-oh, what am I going to do? So he asks us, Barbara, how are we going to survive? My business is deep six, right? Like I can't do this. And the question was, well, where are your customers now? Well, they're in the neighborhood. They're back at home, right. So no one said they don't need food anymore. It's where they are. And you need to go and you need to find out. And of course, he found out they didn't want lunch item. They wanted dinner items and they had a different price point. He had to do all that research. And he did it through, testing his minimum viable product, getting feedback. He asked customers, what did they want? He saw where his revenue was showing up, so he used all the tools, but he changed his delivery model from office buildings to neighborhoods, which sounds really like a no-brainer, but not everyone's thought about that. And I want to, just before we go into the next slide, sorry, back to 2, a quick, I love this, throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. And so I listened to one podcast and this guy said he literally told himself he was going to think of 50 new ideas and see where it landed. And it was like idea number 48, I think, is where he found his pivot. And so I just really want to stress helping your businesses think out of the box and throw spaghetti at the wall, see what lands, see what makes sense. And I just love that he literally set himself the task, think of 50 new ideas. And then he ended up pursuing idea 48. Great, thanks Milka for going back. So number three is diversifying products to balance risk, right? So we've got to think about new products. I won't go into, I want to make sure we still have enough time, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but I know we tell businesses to focus, but to manage risk, we've got to also ask businesses to diversify while keeping one foot planted on the ground. So our only example about this one really quickly is a restaurant cafe who she kept her foot on the ground, which was about food access in her community, in a very rural community in West Virginia. And she decided, she had to close her restaurant, but what could she do? So she provided meals for $5 each for senior citizens. She opened up a pop-up, through a partnership, a pop-up food access point, so people could come with their SNAP dollars and access produce and her products that she was making in her bakery. So it helped her business, but it was always keeping her foot on the ground about food access and then thinking about new delivery systems, different ways to use her existing resources. And she started sourcing more locally, supply chain changed. So these are, I know that's really quick, but and then partnership. And you guys all know that. And we've got to identify businesses' interests. What's the value proposition to them to engage? I think the biggest challenge I faced with this one is helping businesses, especially in this time of crisis, see that the pie is growing. It's not limited. Because if it's limited, it's win-lose. And so we're looking for win-win. And I know it's really hard because, in a time of crisis, people pull back and they're usually trying to see the win-lose. So I really understand that. Okay, so one quick aha that we've had, a lesson learned, is that there's a thin line between a pivot and a new business model. And while we want to focus on pivots, you may well end up needing a new business plan and financials. So I just want to point out the Smile Seattle, the Smile Your City. They had to develop a whole new business model. That wasn't their old business model. So there's as advisors and supporters and planners, thinking about what's the new business and what's an ongoing piece is going to be really important. So great. So where do we pivot? So we've identified 6 opportunities for innovation. I'm not going to do this very deeply. I'm sure you guys will all resonate with this. And then we've got a couple of case studies that we're going to go into. You can redesign your supply chain. This has become really important, more local supply chains. You can build on partnerships and create new partnerships. You can modify your products. You can make price adjustments, right, without going to the bottom of the barrel. You can adjust delivery systems. Going online is the most infamous one for new delivery systems. And you can reach new customers. So we can talk about all of those more, but I wanted to first just have us turn to a worksheet. Just before we get, we've got our worksheet coming up, but I do want to share just a couple of quick stories of partnerships. So sorry, I missed this in the moment, but I know I'm mostly talking about for-profits, but interestingly enough, one of our pivot stories we have on our website is of a nonprofit, Cowan Community Center, that wanted and got a grant to provide emergency meals to for kids and families that couldn't get those through school anymore. But the biggest issue was they didn't have access to credit to be able to buy, right? We all know USDA, they don't give you money up front, right? They reimburse you. So how in the heck are you supposed to get the money to be able to buy all this product to be able to fill these meals for these kids that will eventually get reimbursed? But how are you going to set that up? And I think it's so creative. They actually went to their IGA. They went to their local grocery store that had, of course, a huge line of credit with all these suppliers, and said, will you buy this product on your accounts so we can distribute it and then we'll pay you back? And they were like, yeah, because we care about our community. So this nonprofit that had no credit was able to support and engage in a public-private partnership to be able to access the credit they needed and the supplies they needed to be able to provide these meals that they then have volunteers and kids packing up and distributing. But I thought that was such a creative response to what do we do? It was partnerships. We can find a partnership. So I just wanted to quickly share that story. So thank you for that. Okay, so here we go. So Milka's gonna do something. We've got for Carrie. Do we have a spreadsheet?
Yes, I just added the link into the chat for the whole audience.
Thank you so much. And okay, perfect. I can see it. That was what I was most terrified about, is that I wasn't going to be able to see it. So this is just a quick story. The Carolina Textile District, they're in, I'm sure many of you know about them. They're in Morgantown, North Carolina. They cover sort of the region up there. They're a flexible manufacturing network of small producers coming together for shared services, learning, and principles. They focus when the furniture manufacturing contracts dried up, during the pandemic. They are coming back now, but they left manufacturers without work, and that meant they had employees without work. So rather than lay everybody off, they started to think about what can we do? At the same time, community members, healthcare and hospice care workers called out with a need for sewers to manufacture PPE. Who sews? The people in these furniture manufacturing facilities. So they had to find new materials, supply chains. They had to facilitate coordination and training. They had 60 cut and sew manufacturers that executed over $2 million in PPE contracts. So this is going to be quick, but what do you see as the forms of capital that this district, this business had? So individual, excellent. Knowing how to sew, absolutely, right. Cool. Yeah, the ties between the businesses to even be able to put in those proposals. Great. The manufacturing facilities, financial. Yeah. Yay, political. Whoever's raccoon is writing about political, I love it. Because they probably wouldn't have been able to get the $2 million in PPE contracts if they didn't know the folks in the Capitol, right? So that's exactly right. Yeah, thanks, Raccoon. So what needed presented themselves? We needed PPE, right? So that's pretty good. So how did they pivot? So jumping over to the third column, what do you see as where they pivoted? New partnerships, yep. Yep. New products, yep. Yep. Absolutely, very cool. Yeah. Yeah, right. Gosh, they had to get up to speed in a moment's notice about regulatory environment and all that kind. You're exactly right. That's great. So this you wouldn't be able to answer this because I didn't provide you enough information, but it's an interesting thing for me because these folks are very focused on circularity and sustainability and impacts on the environment. And so one of the biggest challenges they've had, and they're still working on, is the sustainability of their products. Like, I don't know if anyone's been in a hospital recently, but there's a lot of stuff that goes right into the trash. You know, the gowns, the gloves, there's all this stuff. So how does the Carolina Textile District maintain their foot on the ground around sustainability while they're making throwaway products? And you don't have to answer that question. They're still working on it, but that I think has probably been their biggest challenge that they've had. Utilizing, yeah, exactly. Utilize, yep. Thank you so much, you guys. Yeah, it's because they want to keep their foot on the ground. And how are they going to do that? And washable gowns is something that they've proposed, or cotton. Yep, face mat. Boy, yep. They're looking at washable gowns, masks that then have a filter in them that can be reused. Natural capital focus on waste reduction. Absolutely. Yeah. So you guys get it. Like this is a pivot, right? This is a big pivot because we went from, making T-shirts and reupholstering furniture to making PPE. So that was a pretty big pivot, probably a new business model. But building on what we have, building on our values, keeping one foot rooted on the ground. Yeah, people needed jobs. We needed PPE. We had to identify new customers, new supply chains, new partnerships, new products. Exactly. Excellent. So I think we have time for one more. Do we have time for one more? I think we have time for one more.
Yeah,
Wait. We got new capital and new intellectual capital in all these areas of innovation. Yeah. And leadership, right? Like leaders, I'm not even sure what leadership is, but even though I train leadership, but I think that's right. It's new intellectual thinking out of the box and being willing to stake your claim on that and lead from that place. Cool. Okay, one more thought from Raccoon, and then we're gonna go to the next Yeah, that was a really important need, community need, leadership. Absolutely, absolutely. And they stepped in. It was very cool. Cool. Excellent. Oh, so good. Okay, so we're going to go into the next one really quickly. This is the public market. And by the way, both of these stories, you notice how it says listen to the full story. There's a link here. So we did a series over the summer called Pivot Profiles, 15 minutes, talking to 11 different pivots in Central Appalachia. So both of these have recordings that you can access and listen to them tell their story rather than me. But anyway, I just wanted to highlight that. So, okay, so public market. So public market is a local and natural food store, an educational hub for food literacy, and a small hub for local food production in Wheeling, West Virginia. What that means is they have a small community kitchen. They have a small kitchen that they make some sandwiches out of. So Ohio County schools closed during lockdowns. I know that sounds familiar to everybody on the phone. And that meant there was food insecurity for students that rely on the school meals. One of the things they had, a little bit of a giveaway, but they had existing relationships with farmers, local chefs, the large commercial kitchen at the community college, community foundations, and state officials. And they launched the pivot, right, was they launched a restaurant to schools program that provides meals to students throughout the week, no questions asked. They've supplied 2,000 meals per week for the past several months, free of charge to students, but they're charged at $5 each to funders. I'm going to tell you that I forget exactly what I think it's $3.65 comes from the state. That's what the state would have paid for like wieners in a can or something. And then they were able to find the additional $1.45 or whatever was needed from local foundations. So actually the kids get a wholesome, really good meal made by a local chef and volunteers that they can heat up at home. The kids get it for free and it's completely covered, which I'll stop talking, but the public market was so discouraged by the Dorito chips and the wieners in a can and all this stuff that was going to the kids. They were like, we've got to do this better. And in the process, they provided work for chefs, work for volunteers, work like buying up all that local farmer production and produce to be able to go into all those meals. Okay, I'm done. So what form of capital does the business have? And then what needs presented and where did they pivot their service?
This is Carrie. I'll pipe in and say if you're not in the Google Doc for the online exercise, I pasted that into the chat again. And also one of our attendees, Jillian, shared a link about textile supply chain and sustainability. So I put that out in the chat to the whole audience as well.
Great, great. Right, food insecurity. Yep, relationships with the farmers. Community foundations, absolutely. What a big connection the guy had. But I think we all have those, especially when we're in the red zone, right? Community foundations have stepped up. Schools, yep. Yep, they pivoted their service in terms of delivery. Not so much supply chain, but partnerships, product. Great. So this is excellent. Yep, different customer base. Yep, delivery. One of the things I love about this example too is that they knew their numbers to know that $5 per meal was the right price. They knew what it cost them to make a meal, so they weren't going to lose money on $5 each. So I really appreciate that as sort of their understandings. Do you guys pick these names? Walrus, chipmunk, wolf? It's very cool. I want to be one of those. Political capital, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Great. Well, I do encourage, we're going to move on, but I do really encourage you all to listen to our pivot profiles online. You can go to creativedisruptors.com. We'll share that at the end to hear all 11 of those. Okay, so we're going to go back to the PowerPoint. We're almost done because I want to make sure we have enough time for some questions. But those were our stories and application. Okay, so what were our lessons learned? Help folks find and stay in the green zone. That's so important, right? We've heard about that already. What do people already do best? What resources do they already have to support the pivot? Great. Next one. We're going to go through these quickly. So dig deep to find the resources to build on and spend time to understand customers' current needs and desires, right? Rely on unlikely suspects. The government with their $1 million contracts for PPE probably wasn't who thought the textile district was going to go with, but it was an unlikely suspect. So we see we've got another story online about JT Tech that focuses, we're making tents and things for private companies. That dried up. Government became one of the folks. So don't go it alone. Great. Next one. So understand the time frame. So, you know, we've kind of talked on this before, but businesses need to keep people employed, pay rent, and continue current services flowing in the short term, all the while developing a new model. So I think it's really important to think about what is short term and what is longer term. And it takes a while to really execute a change of business plan. It's short to just suddenly go online. But we're trying to make that difference between, is this about surviving or is this about exploring new business models? So that's something as you help your businesses and your communities think about, what is the time frame?
Something
Right.
I think that comes up here, Barbara, especially a detail that we left out of our public market story is how the public market with, you know, all of their education programs around local food has been targeting the local school system as a partner for a long time. And so understanding that when they were, you know, writing their 50 ideas and deciding if this one was the one for them, that was a big factor in deciding that, yes, this makes sense because that's a long-term goal of theirs.
Yeah, great, great, excellent. Yeah, so we make decisions that will impact the future. Really good. Thank you, Milka, for that. Good. And then, you know, this downtime is an opportunity for entrepreneurs to reevaluate their business model, organization goals, and financials. I have been really struck how many businesses and entrepreneurs I talk to, once they get over the immediate panic of like, how am I going to stay alive? Then they start going, oh my gosh, like I actually used to do this program. I want to do it again. Or here's a whole new market I never realized. Or wait, our products cost too much in the marketplace. How do we reduce those costs? So I think it's actually, we've seen a lot of clients take this advantage of this pivot, not to just go back to the way things were, but to do that whole spiraling forward and to see the molecules coming back in a different way, in a different business model, in a different way of doing business. And that's who's going to be successful, honestly. It's not going to be the businesses that just can't wait to go back to the way things were. And then, you know, stay calm. We'll figure this all out as we go forward. That's fine. So yeah, let's have some questions and discussions. You can use the chat box. We've got a lot of great people on the phone that are going to help manage the chat box because I can't even see the chat box. But for more information, here's our phone number. Here's our emails. We try to keep our website up to date. We've got stories, different things, and also we have a Facebook page. So just putting that out there for hopefully some useful tools and approaches to thinking about how to support the businesses in your communities that you said were, and I agree, are so critical to resilience, because the jobs, the community cohesiveness, the culture, all those things you said, that's why we have to support them, and I know you do. So those are some ideas about how to do that. Great. So questions?
We have a sample one here for you from myself. And the question here for me is, Barbara, you mentioned that the businesses that want to go back to the way things were prior to the pandemic are not probably going to be successful. Going along with that, what role do you think attitude plays in the success of a potential pivot?
Wow, what a great question. I think the best entrepreneurs I know have an open mind. And I think that is really key. So I don't know what the answer is for any particular business or anything like that, but a willingness to learn and have an open mind and question our assumptions, right? Because we think we know a lot that we actually don't know. I think that is where the key attitudes for me that would be really important.
Wonderful. And Barbara, we have a request that you share the story of the salt business from West Virginia. We hear that that's a good pivot story.
The salt business, cool. I wonder who brought that up. Okay, so JD Saltworks. The thing that's so great about them, they have an amazing business. They are one of they get their salt. It's actually, Milka can correct me, but it's like the only place I think that salt comes with no microplastics in it, because it's from the ground. It's not from the water. And so amazing business. And so they've been selling salt and salt, you know, wood crafted thing, whatever. They've had a little business, and they've done well. The pivot is suddenly how many people wanted to buy salt online during the pandemic, right? Like, so that became a more limited model for them. Their asset they had from the very beginning is they're excellent at marketing, and they're excellent at online marketing. So they created partnerships with their neighbors that had jams, jellies. Oh, you can go online. They have so much stuff now in their Appalachian store. But they started selling all of their neighbors' products. So what a great way to talk about what do we have and what don't we have. So their neighbors were like, I don't know how to go online. I don't know what I'm doing with the, you know, whatever, but I sure have good jams and jellies. So by partnering with JD Saltworks, that's so good at marketing, they were able to sell all those products that they were making through this online retailer that is really good at that. And of course, there's a financial agreement. There's a percentage of sales that goes back to JD Saltworks for having done that. But you know, if your choice is like no sales or some sales with a little bit of a reduced, you know, commission, got it. You know, the choice is a no-brainer. But so that for me is like a great story of what do people have, and recognizing what they don't have and being willing to partner to sell their stuff. So you'll see it if you go online. A lot of stuff is sold through that site now.
Excellent. Thanks, Barbara. And we just had another question come in. The question is, how can EDDs use those 8 capitals that you mentioned to help businesses identify potential assets that they have? And other members of the audience, you can feel free to chime in after Barbara's done answering to talk about assets that you see or some unexpected characteristics that businesses can benefit from in your community.
So I have a really short answer to this question. I think actually it's the act of asking that is so important. And if that's what I love about that list of those 8 capitals. You might not have all of them, but the fact that you're asking those questions makes people think like, oh gosh, what is it that I have? And that it's the act of asking around those 8 capitals that's so powerful.
Another thing to I think that we didn't touch on is one of the capitals that these EDDs have that I want you all to hear that a lot of businesses don't is going to be a lot of that knowledge too around where to find capital, especially, you know, the public market being affiliated with a lot of nonprofits. We're able to navigate that USDA money coming in and figure that out. Same with Cowan Community Center, but a lot of businesses don't. So I think that that's a form of capital that a lot of you all have that you can share.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Like, you all have capital too. It's not just the capital the businesses have, it's what you have, right? Which is great. Knowledge and contacts and political, and yeah.
Excellent. And along those same lines, I know that small businesses are very, very important to smaller rural communities, which many of our participants belong to today, which is great. How are some ways that just your average everyday community members can contribute to a successful pivot within their community?
Well, I definitely think the first way is being a customer, right? Weighing in on what they want, what they don't want, what their needs are, what their needs aren't. I think that's really important. You know, that's like the second key is like, what are your customers' current needs? And we mostly work with community-based businesses. So when we say customers, it's going to be community members are going to be those customers. So I think that's really the most important way that community can engage.
And we have a comment here from Matthew Weaver. Matthew says, structured community development programs like Main Street, they do surveys to identify some of the different assets. So that can be a great idea as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And most of those surveys do focus on community assets, not quite on what an individual business's assets are, but yeah, absolutely, very important.
This is Carrie again. Would it be helpful to put up the slide that has that list of capitals or assets again? Do we want to look at that and,
yeah, so
and talk briefly about what those are?
Yeah, great.
All right, that'll take just a moment to get the slides back up. Yeah.
Up to 1, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so these were, you know, we frame these more in terms of an individual business and their assets, but yeah, these are obviously what we need in our communities too, and what we have in our communities. So yeah, thanks, Carrie. Great idea. So skills, health is number 1, intellectual, thinking out of the box to lead, physical resources, which includes broadband, by the way, but how many times do I work with people around housing and they want to build all new houses when hotels are falling apart? It's like, wait, maybe there's some other way to think about build capital. Community trust, reputation, partnerships for social, political, impacting the flow of resources, financial ability to raise capital investment, what Milka was talking about, what you guys all know, how to access some of these capitals, natural and cultural. Yeah.
And Barbara, we have another question here, and it is, what is the best way to create a viable partnership?
Well, wow, this could be, I see we have 1 minute left and this could be an hour, but I'm gonna say the very first thing is helping people to see, and I know Melissa's on the call, she'll totally resonate with this. The first thing is to help people find out what their interest is. What can they gain from partnering, right? So my business will be better if I partner with this person. I will make more money. I will serve the community better. I will meet my mission as a nonprofit. There's many ways to think about your interest, right? And it's not all about money or anything. It's really, many people have many interests. If a partnership can meet that interest, people are going to play. If it doesn't meet that interest, they're not going to play. So for me, the very first step is understanding why people come to the table. What is their interest that brings them to the table to even want to talk about a partnership? And then when you find the commonalities in those interests, that's when you can start to move forward.
And Barbara, when there are certain partnerships being built, is there sort of a pattern with what type of organizations partner with different organizations? That is to say, do they tend to partner with organizations of the same type as their business or the same sort of wheelhouse as their organization?
Nice. Good question. Yeah, great question, Kennedy. So, you know, birds of a feather flock together, right? So people tend to go to who they feel most comfortable with, which is not exactly who you probably want to partner with. So you have to have somebody willing to think out of the box who says, who else, and is willing to, like, say, see that, you know, public, private, nonprofit, municipal government, local government, state government, whoever, to see that interest. And by focusing on the interest as opposed to the type of organization, hopefully that can help us get out of some of those barriers we set up for ourselves, which is like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk to all the nonprofits. So it comes back to assumptions. Like, I have an assumption that nonprofits are going to understand me and want to go with what I want to do. That's an assumption. Like, there could be a really good for-profit partner that wants to go with you because it makes sense to their business model, or a good municipal partner that wants to go with you because it makes sense for what they're trying to accomplish, their interests. So yes, that's such a great question. And we tend to have an assumption about who wants to partner and who doesn't want to partner, and we need to test those assumptions, and we usually don't. So yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I
And
think that's all.
we have another comment from Matthew Weaver. And Matthew says, those 8 capital resources, as well as how they fit into the MS roadmaps for accomplishing the vision that they are pursuing.
Wait, can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I was like focused on the chat box. My bad.
Of course, yeah. So Matthew Weaver says in his comment, those 8 capital resources, as well as how they will fit into the MS roadmaps for accomplishing the vision that they are pursuing.
So you have to help me, Kenny. I'm not sure what the question is.
Matthew clarified that MS is Main Street. It actually was additional detail about the surveys that they do, rather than a question.
Okay,
That's
thank
great.
you, Mary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, yeah, good.
Very good.
I personally, just as a quick aside, I think whether it's these 8 capitals or 7 or 6 or 9, you know, whatever the magic number is for you, I'm not gonna worry about that. But just asking these questions, I think, is huge as we do economic development planning, as we do Main Street development, as we do, you know, whatever down street development, whatever we do. I think using this as a framework to ask the questions we might not be thinking about is really useful. So yes, thank you, Matthew. I think that's exactly right.
Great. And Barbara, we have another question here. And it says, when it comes to the 8 different types of capital, are there certain combinations that tend to work well together to create a pivot?
Yeah, so I'm gonna, the first 4, there's no accident in this order. So what do we have in terms of our skills and our workforce and the entrepreneur? Are we thinking out of the box? What is our leadership ability? What kind of physical resources do we have? And what kind of social capital do we have? So the partnerships, the trust, the reputation. That's the first level for sure. If you can focus on those 4, then focus on political, you know, which is about getting the community foundation to fund you or whatever. Then focus on the financial ability to raise capital investment, and natural and cultural. So I think it's important because people under stress are going to go to financial first. And I don't see financial capital as the first one, because financial capital for what? For what pivot, right? We need the ideas, we need the leadership, we need the build on our physical resources and our community resources. Then we have a story to tell to be able to access the financial resources. But I appreciate businesses in stress are going to be like, how do I pay my staff? Right? That's where they're going to start, is financial. So that's why we do, on a different day, we do stabilizing your financials. Like, we actually are like, okay, great. So you're like in stress over your financials. We have a whole way you can think about stabilizing those and how to minimize those and how to manage those, because we don't want financials to lead the conversation. It has to really be about the first four.
Great. And, oh, this is a good one. We have a question about testing assumptions. How do you encourage businesses to get into a space that's potentially uncomfortable and explore those partnerships that they wouldn't necessarily look for?
Yeah, so can you repeat it one more time? I'm like biting for time here. So can you just repeat it one more time?
Yeah. So our question is in reference to testing assumptions.
Right.
And they ask, how do you encourage businesses to get to a space that's potentially a little uncomfortable and explore those partnerships that they wouldn't necessarily look for?
Yeah, so I love that, because, gosh, in northern New Hampshire, I talk all the time about, oh, we have to have like businesses working together, whatever. It's an uphill battle, right? Like, businesses don't actually want to work together. And so I really appreciate this question. It resonates with my experience in northern New Hampshire. But for me, it comes back to really understanding what the self-interest is, and how, if you can make a proposal to somebody about, like, if you partner with X, Y, and Z, you will meet your interest. And now I'm going to say that takes research, right? It's not natural. People don't go there. They see the pie is limited. So you will probably have to do some research to help make the case about why working with X, Y, and Z business will help you. You're going to have to know about the tourists coming to your region, or the people, your customer segments, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of homework that goes into helping people see their interests. So I say research, understanding the customer base, understanding the differentials between the products. Like, when you start, and understanding differentials between delivery systems, when you start to understand that, you can tell a story to a business that is not threatening, but actually is collaborative. But that's on us. For better or for worse, that's on us to tell that story. Because if we just go to businesses, I think about northern New Hampshire, if I just go up there, I'm like, oh man, you guys should work together because you have like similar interests. They're like, what the blank? They're like not going to go there. Like, I have to present the research and the data and the story to show the why there is a synergy between their interests. So I don't know if that's answering the question, but I just feel like that's on us to figure that out and provide that data.
Definitely. And in regards to financial stability, are there some small business tips for that, and that EDDs might not think of? That sounds like a really, really good place that we could start off from, as far as how to get businesses to a mental place that they can start to think differently.
Yeah, so caveat in that question is that we might not think of. I don't know what people are thinking of. I think what we think of is pretty familiar to most people. I mean, it's renegotiating contracts, renegotiating what's due out and what's coming in. One of the things we've worked on a lot is like helping people think differently about their inventory. So how can they reduce their inventory but still buy in collaboration with other people in their community, so they can still get the value add of buying at scale? So, I'm a restaurant. I can't have 20,000 plates sitting on the shelf, plastic plates, but I can, because it costs, that's just inventory, just sitting there. Like I got to reduce my inventory. What do I do? Well, I can buy plates at twice as much because I'm buying 100 plates at a time, or I can collaborate with my other restaurants on Main Street and we can all get together and get the plates we need at a reduced cost because we're buying in bulk. It's back to the partnerships. It's back to thinking a little bit out of the box around that. But my hunch is most people on the call know most of the ways. Renegotiating loans, payment policies, rent, lots of all those things. I think people know.
Excellent point. And we have a question here from Matthew. Matthew asks, is there anything to focus on working only with low-hanging fruit that's willing to be innovative versus the more, we'll say, wannabes that have always been more marginal businesses?
Okay, can you ask it again? This is obviously my MO, but anyway, can you ask it again?
Yeah, of course. Is there anything to focus on working only with low-hanging fruit that's willing to be innovative versus the wannabes that have always been marginal businesses?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question, but I'm going to say delivery systems. To me, that's number one. Delivery and supply chains are the two that I think are really important places to start. Then, clearly we go to products, pricing, but it's interesting because most businesses want to do pricing first. But I'm not willing to throw the towel in on pricing. I want to think about delivery. I want to think about supply chain. I want to think about buying in bulk. I want to think about different ways to solve those problems. Maybe some new products based on customer needs. Pricing for me is not number one. I would never encourage a business to reduce their pricing just because it's a pandemic. I wouldn't do that.
Very true. Good point there. And we have another question here, and it says, taking into consideration that our country is very, very vast, and we have all sort of different communities. Like we have more rural communities versus metropolitan and urban. What do the pivots look like in each of those different areas, and how do they differ from one another? How does an Appalachian pivot look different than a pivot, let's say, in a large, in Philadelphia, for example, where Milka's at right now?
Cool. Yeah, and my answer is I don't actually know, but I'm going to say it goes back to those 4 keys. Like, are you building on what you have? Are you understanding your customers' current needs? Not what you think they need, but what they actually need. And, are you building partnerships? I agree with whoever asked the question. It's going to look really different. Community by community, state by state, urban, rural, absolutely. But this is why we talk about 4 keys to pivoting. I think we could even talk just really quickly, Milka, about Philly FoodWorks, right? So this is an urban-based business, food hub in Philadelphia. Understand and build what they have. They did that. They've expanded their business multifold, because they had really good aggregation and distribution systems. They changed them in order to do door-to-door delivery versus pickups, sort of site pickups. So they modified, but they basically built on what they had. They built on their partnerships that they had. My favorite story is how when we all were wondering where were we going to get our meat, worried about that, they were able to say, give a loan to a butcher so he could put in place COVID procedures. He could put in place the plastic things. He could actually do an add-on in addition to his facility so he could have people spread out, right? So they supported their partnerships. And ultimately, they listened to their customers. Their customers wanted different products. They wanted the meat that they up to then were like, yeah, some people wanted meat, but wasn't a big deal. Suddenly became a big deal, and fish and all these things. So And that's an urban example. So I'm just sharing that because it's an urban example, but it just goes back to these 4 keys to pivoting.
Great.
I think building off that, oh, sorry about that.
Go right ahead, Milka, you're fine.
Another 30 seconds. One big difference that we see between rural and urban pivots is specifically what capitals they utilize, because obviously the big difference there is what kind of capitals our communities have. So I think that's where you start, and then we develop different looking pivots.
Very, very true. Well, thank you so much to Barbara and Milka for sharing your insights, and to everyone on the line for joining us today. We're just about out of time for the session here, but there is another session coming up in this room, and it is entitled Supporting Tourism-Based Economies. And it is going to feature a speaker on that panel named Melissa Levy, and she'll mention a framework for organizing different partners in the value chain. So that would be an excellent follow-up session for all of our attendees from today's session. So we will have in our other webinar room, we'll have the session Bringing Broadband to Rural Communities, a very important topic as well, and different regions there. So those sessions will begin at 3:15 Eastern Time after a short break. So thank you all for joining us, and have a fantastic afternoon.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you so much.